Hi, this is Soering, and this is the first of a 5-part series on DNA in the Haysom murder case. In this first video, I'm going to be talking about what the DNA evidence in this case actually says. Derek and Nancy Haysom were, sadly, murdered in 1985. Back then, they did not have DNA testing yet. All they had was serology testing, blood group testing. At the crime scene, they found blood from all 4 blood groups, A, AB, O, and B. Below, I've linked up the serology report, the blood report from 1985. I always link up all of these documents in all of my videos so you can check this yourself. Look at the chart in the back. You're going to find blood from all 4 blood groups. And you're also going to see that Derek and Nancy Haysom had the blood groups A, B, and A. So the blood from the blood groups O and B had to be the killer's blood. These were knife murders, and in knife murders, the perpetrators usually injure themselves and leave their blood at the crime scene. So it makes sense that in this case as well, 2 killers with the blood groups O and B left their blood at the crime scene. 1 year later, in 1986, I was arrested and I gave a false confession. And in that false confession, I told the police that I cut my hand. Here's a page from the transcript. You can look at this yourself. That's also linked up below. 4 years after that, in 1990, they finally put me on trial. And in the meantime, they found out that I had the blood group O, one of the 4 blood groups at the crime scene, and one of the 2 groups that had to be the perpetrator's blood. So this looked pretty suspicious, obviously. Number 1, I said that I cut myself. Number 2, my blood group was found at the crime scene. Number 3, it's not the victim's blood group. It's blood group O. And the prosecutor reminded the jury of this 26 times in his closing arguments. I've also linked that up below. This was a really important part of his case, and it makes sense. It did look suspicious. 19 years after my trial, in 2009, they finally did DNA tests on all these blood samples. And there were several really interesting findings. The first one was my DNA was not found anywhere at the crime scene. I've linked up the DNA test below. You can look at it yourself. It says that Soering and Elizabeth Haysom, that was my girlfriend back then, Soering and Elizabeth Haysom are excluded as sources of the samples tested. That's pretty surprising. If I was there, they should have found my blood. And then some more interesting things were found out. It turns out that some of the samples that were tested were samples of the blood group O. I'm going to show you what these samples are. Please take a look at this photograph to my left. That is a sample called 6FE. FE stands for front entrance. Makes sense. It's blood on the door handle, right? And here you can see in the 1985 serology report, that blood on the door handle has blood group O. That has to be killer's blood. And then you look at the DNA test from 2009, and you'll see that it says for 6FE, Soering and Elizabeth Haysom are eliminated as sources. That means that's not my blood. You've got a sample that's type O, and it's got a different DNA profile. And that's not all that strange, because remember, nearly half the population has blood group O. It turns out there are 2 samples like this. The other one is called 2FE. That's a little lower down on the door. Here you see a crime scene sketch, and here you see the line out of the DNA report. But it doesn't end there. They looked at all the samples that were tested, and they found 2 other samples that were really interesting. Here's the first one. I'm showing you a picture. That's blood on the counter, right next to Nancy Haysom's body. And it has blood group AB. Here's the photo from the 1985 serology report. But then you look at the 2009 DNA report, and it turns out that this sample on the counter is male. It has XY chromosomes. But that cannot be, theoretically, because Nancy Haysom is a woman and she has XX chromosomes. This is male AB blood, and that's really peculiar. It suggests that there's a second killer at the crime scene. And there's a second sample like this as well. Don't have a photograph of that one. It's actually on the where you enter, the sill of the door. And here's a crime scene sketch showing you where that is. These two samples are male AB blood. So what you have in total from the combination of the 1985 blood group tests and the 2009 DNA tests is you have two samples of type O blood that has a different genetic profile than mine, and you have two samples of AB blood, which is Nancy Haysom's blood type, but it's male blood, so it suggests that there's a killer at the crime scene who's a man with AB blood. Now, who these people are, we don't know, because there's no way to identify them. These are, first of all, partial profiles. Partial profiles cannot be used to identify someone. And the second thing is, if they're not in the DNA data bank, then there's no way to find them. And of course, only a small percentage of the population, convicted criminals, are in the DNA data bank. And these samples that are really interesting from the crime scene cannot be identified, so we don't know who that is. But specifically regarding the type O blood samples, we know it's not me, because once again, I am excluded as a source of both 6Fe, that's the blood on the door handle, and 2Fe, that's the blood a little bit lower down on the door, which is type O, my blood type, but different DNA profile. Now, what does this mean legally? That's the key thing. That means if the trial were held again today, the prosecutor could not tell the jury 26 times that, that must be my blood at the crime scene because I am blood group O and blood group O was found at the crime scene. He could not say that anymore if a new trial were held today. And of course, that would change the outcome of the trial entirely if this part of the prosecution case were missing. If he were fair, the prosecutor would have to tell the jury 26 times that I'm excluded as a source of this blood on the door. And of course, the other thing is that the combination of serology testing and DNA testing suggests the presence of a man with Nancy Haysom's blood group. So, a second perpetrator who, again, is not me. I'm excluded from that blood as well. And that changes everything about the case at trial. If the jury had heard all of that, there would most likely have been reasonable doubt, almost certainly have been reasonable doubt. And that's not the same as saying I'm completely innocent, but it's saying that there's enough to find me not guilty based on reasonable doubt.